So just bear in mind, I will not show anything until it's time.
Like and subscribe.
Yo, welcome back to the channel, boys and girls. In today's video, I want to talk about the 5 things I've learned since getting back into the world of crit races, particularly practice crits, because so far I've only done a series of practice crits. I haven't done any official calendar events yet, but that time will be coming soon. Now, if you are an experienced racer out there who has been racing for years, please feel free to leave a comment down below on some of the things that you've learned that you think will be helpful to the audience. And then if you are someone that is interested in getting into the world of racing, maybe doing a little bit more competitive group rides or just becoming an overall better cyclist in general, then there are going to be some points in this video that will be helpful on your path to becoming a better cyclist. So without further ado, let's begin. Point number 1, practice makes perfect. My local club here on the northwest side of Chicago hosted 6 weeks of practice crits on a closed circuit, and each week offered up a range between 3 to 4 races per night, ranging in time or duration from about 15 to about 30 minutes long. Just for some context, a usual Cat 5 race is about 30 minutes long, maybe 25 to 30 minutes. And so basically that means 3 to 4 times a night you're doing a Cat 5 duration level race. And so if you do the math, that means that effectively after 6 weeks of these practice crits, I have now done about 18 to 19 criteriums. It's crazy to think about because this isn't my first opportunities to be in crits. In fact, I did a few crits about 3 years ago. They were okay. I just didn't really enjoy myself. And so my plan for this off season coming into the spring was to be a little bit more focused on my fitness, talking to a few coaches in the area, and really trying to be a little bit more dialed into this world of racing, at least to the point that I would actually be able to enjoy it and hopefully in the summertime get some sort of results. So 18 to 19 crits I've done so far in the span of 6 weeks. It's crazy to think about it. Now within each of these practice crits, we had both an A group and a B group. The A group, which I was in, consisted of majority Cat 3s all the way up to Cat 1 guys. And some of these Cat 1 guys, particularly the 606 guys, they compete on the national calendar day races with the likes of like Legion. Of course, we got to say Legion because that's the buzzword. Miami Blazers, Team Mike's Bikes, all these high-end professional races. Now, I mentioned before that the circuit itself is a closed course, so this is actually insured. You have to actually have a license to race, all these things. And then the course itself, on paper it looked like a 4-corner crit, but more or less it was just 2 flowing corners, and then there was 2 actual corners on the course. However, if you took really good lines, you basically could do the whole entire course without having to touch brakes. But just think about this for a second in these practice crits, right? If you're doing 6 weeks in a row where you're racing 3 to 4 times a night each at about 20 minutes, think about how many laps and how many corners you get to practice in that span. And if you are a little bit apprehensive of getting into this world of competitively riding your bike, this is where practice crits comes in handy. Now, obviously, I know that not every single major city around the world, probably they don't have the opportunity to host practice crits. But for myself, I cannot tell you how effective these 6 weeks of racing has been and just how much my confidence has grown from the first week up until the last week. I would say the first week I was nervous. I'm sure my heart rate was probably higher than it typically would be if I was doing like a VO2 session indoors. But by the 6th week, I was so comfortable taking corners at speed, being able to converse with people in the peloton, having people basically elbow me at my hip, all these things that I would just be super nervous to do otherwise. But being able to have these practice crits has really prepared me to take on the more quote unquote real crit races. Point number 2. Fast group rides are not the same as practice crits, and practice crits are not the same as actual crits. I know that this topic is going to upset a few people out there, but this is a very important topic to talk about. So someone like myself who has done basically 3 to 4 years of doing these fast group rides, typically here in Chicago, how these fast group ride goes is you're basically doing steady state for about 35 to 40 miles, and then thrown in there are about 8 to 9 sprint segments. And while it is nice to go for these sprint segments, the reality is for the majority of us, you're basically just sitting in the draft the whole entire time. Sure, at some points it'll get surgy, but the overall dynamics and just how the ride flows it's nothing like a practice crit. And even from what I'm told, it's not really even like a road race at all. So as much as we want to try to compare ourselves to actual racers, perhaps you're someone who is sprinting in the sprint segments against actual racers, it's not the same as an actual race. And anyone who does race on a regular level who has experience in this, they're basically going to laugh behind your back because it's just not the same. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, number one is I learned basically the first week of doing practice crits just how close these racers are to each other, shoulder to shoulder. Usually in these faster group rides, you give yourself a little bit of a space, a little bit of a gap just for safety. But even in the practice crits, people are very close to you. Like I mentioned earlier, like getting elbowed in the hip, having people basically rub shoulders with you in a corner going 30 miles an hour. These are just things that you're just not going to experience in a fast group ride. And speaking on cornering, especially where we ride here in these faster group rides, there's just long stretches. It could be minutes at a time where you're not ever having to ever practice cornering. But when you're in a practice crit, these corners are coming up to you literally like every 30 to 40 seconds, and you will learn quickly how to corner. Otherwise, you're either going to crash yourself out or become a danger to others around you. So just the level of just how close in proximity people are, it's not the same. And another point that I've noticed too when these practice crits is some of the faster riders and faster teams here in Chicago, when you see them on the fast group ride, they're not really trying. They're probably going 5/10 of the effort. But in these practice crits, they're going like 9/10. So the same guys who you see in these fast group rides, some of these guys were literally lapping the field in the practice crits. So I don't really want to hear about your comms. I don't really want to hear about how you almost beat Cat 1 so-and-so guy on the sprint segment in a fast group ride. Just know that while that might be good for your ego, the reality is these guys are not really trying. And if you want to be competitive, that's great and all. I know we all want to be competitive in our fast group rides, but honestly, if you really want to be competitive against these guys, then pin up a number and go to a race. I don't want to hear about it in your fast group ride because the reality is it's just not the same. And with all that being said, I know that in actual crits that people are going to be even more aggressive in the corners, dive bombing it towards the end of the race. If you have a gap, they're definitely going to fill those gaps in really quickly. All these things that you just rarely see, at least in our local fast group rides, these are all the things that I expect to see in the actual crit. Here in the practice crit, we're all friends, we all know each other, we all ride together. So while it is significantly more aggressive than a fast group ride, when it comes to an actual crit where the win is on the line and you're probably racing with people you've never met before, just know that even in the actual crit, the level of aggression is going to be that much more significant than in a practice crit. Before we continue the video, I want to give a huge shout out to Joe's No Flat for sending me out their variety of current products on the market today. Now, Joe's No Flat, as you can tell, they are a brand of tubeless sealant. And if you have been following my channel for at least the last 6 to 8 months, you know that I have started to convert all of my road bikes over to running tubeless, specifically my race bike, the same race bike that I have been running for all of these 6 weeks of practice crits. And so far, I love this stuff. In fact, I love this stuff over what I was using previously of some of the other competitors. This stuff is fantastic. Now, Joe's No Flat. Now, I can't tell you who they are, but just know that they do support at least one of the world tour teams in the peloton as of today. So their tubeless sealant has been proven to work at the highest level. I myself, knock on wood, I haven't gotten any punctures yet with this stuff, so it works really well. So let me just go over what these products are specifically. So you have on the left here, this is their Elite Racers sealant. This is typically you would use for gravel, which is why they provided such a high volume of it. This is going to be for those applications where the tire pressure is on the lower side. And then the one in the middle, this is the road sealant. Now, why would that be important? Well, the thing is, when you are running tubeless for the road, the tire pressure is usually significantly higher than that of gravel. So once that puncture happens, you need a sealant that's going to be able to get to that puncture as quickly as possible. And so this road sealant is formulated in order to do just such. And I really appreciate that they've considered that versus just having the standard stuff for gravel. Another thing that I really like about this road sealant, which is what I have been using on my race bike, is you notice that it does not include a plastic tube applicator. Now, my understanding for this is because unlike some of the other competitors on the market, this stuff does not freeze when the weather gets cold. Perhaps you keeping this in your shed or your garage, but Joe's No Flat, they're so confident in their product that it's not going to freeze that they don't need to provide you with the tube. You just basically be able to apply this directly into the tire. Another cool thing about this too is, as you guys can see there, this one bottle is for 2 tires. So you don't have to faff around or guess how much milliliters you need to apply to each tire. You basically just have half the bottle for one tire, then the other half for the other. So you have the 2 different types of sealant. And this stuff right here, bro, this stuff has been flying off the shelf. This is their sealant remover. This stuff is so effective. I can't tell you how good this stuff really works. So if you have old tubeless residue, anything like that, this stuff works fantastic. And I will provide a link in this video, which would just be an affiliate link for you guys to purchase these products. But the price on these is really reasonable. Very effective stuff. And it's nice to be able to have both an application for gravel as well as for road. Number 3, pack dynamics and drafting. Now, these are 2 things that I've always struggled with over the years, even in just the faster group rides here in Chicago. But I cannot tell you how much energy you can save just by drafting. I know that sounds obvious, but I've had to learn pretty much the first week of practice crits just how important learning this is. It's just as important as learning how to corner effectively. Basically what happens is, you know, as soon as you get out of the draft, especially when the speeds get really fast, say when you start getting above 26, 27 miles an hour, the drafting becomes so important to the point where if you don't pay attention, you can easily drop yourself out of the pack. I know this because this is what happened to me literally the first week of practice crits. And then all the weeks afterwards, I learned this skill and I was happy to say I didn't get dropped anymore. But it was a very difficult lesson to learn. And so drafting along with just pack dynamics is a very important skill you need to know. Essentially is knowing when you can leave a gap open, understanding when it's time to move up. Perhaps it's towards the end of the race and you realize you're too far back. The question becomes, how are you going to move up effectively towards the front of the race without burning too many matches so that you have energy left over to be able to contest the sprint? This is where those pack dynamics really come in handy. What if there's a break up the road? How are you going to counter that? How are you going to chase that down or bridge it down? If you're 40 wheels back, you're probably not going to be the guy to be able to do that. So being able to understand the ebbs and flows of the peloton, understanding when it's time to move up, perhaps when it's time to maybe tail gun the pack, these are all things that you'll need to learn. And again, this kind of goes back to my previous point of why these crits or even just practice crits are not the same as fast group rides, because these are just things that you don't really have to think about, because you know at the end of the day for these faster group rides, it's not a race, it's just a training ride. But in these practice crits, you have to be cognizant of these things all the time, especially if you don't have teammates in the race with you. If you're a solo racer, that means a lot of the responsibility could potentially come down to you. So understanding how to draft to save energy, always paying attention to what's happening in the pack. If there's a break up the road, perhaps someone is going for a preem, all these things you have to be very mindful of. But if you can do this effectively, you can save so much energy and not burn yourself out towards the end of the race. Point number 4, your bike isn't as important as you think it is. Now, I know that's kind of a diabolical thing to say, considering my channel revolves around me featuring the latest and greatest of Far East products like frames, wheels, bikes, etc. And I don't get me wrong, the bike that I'm currently running as my race bike, it's not a cheap bike at all, but it is a fast bike, and it is still a little bit cheaper than the likes of a Western branded bike. But in these scenarios where you're sitting in the draft, you're focusing on your cornering, you're understanding pack dynamics, the bike in and of itself just doesn't really make a difference. And it's funny because there were some guys throughout these past 6 weeks who were getting better results than I was each week. Guys who were a little bit younger than me, but these guys were rocking like 15 to 20-year-old either steel or alloy rim brake bikes, doing just fine. So at my level, at a Cat 5, the bikes are just not as important as you think. And if you are suffering or if you're having a hard time, I can 100% guarantee you that it's not going to be because of your bike. So if you are someone that is new to this sport just in general, or you're thinking about getting into competitive races, I wouldn't pay too much attention to your bikes. That's probably really not going to be an issue until you start getting to like the Cat 2s or maybe Cat 1 level of racers, something that I probably will never ever get to myself. But just understand that your bike is just not that important. Just go out there and have fun. There are plenty of other aspects when it comes to cycling that are far, far more important than just your bike itself. And point number 5, your desire to win and understanding race dynamics is more important than sheer fitness. What do I mean by this? Well, after these 6 weeks of practice crits, I'll be the first to tell you that throughout these weeks, there were a few times where the rider either in front of me or to the side of me, they performed what I would consider a dodgy move, or at least that's what I thought at first. However, when I would go home to review the footage and then I would show the footage to other very experienced racers, it turned out that they were not in the wrong, and that basically I had either opened up a gap, which meant they went to aggressively fill that gap, and other times when I thought maybe someone was chopping my wheel, but the reality is they weren't chopping my wheel. It could have just simply been that the course sort of curved in such a way where I basically got my own self squeezed into a curb. And this is why I mentioned earlier why these faster group rides are not the same as races, because just the overall level of aggression in a race, even a practice crit, is far more significant and amplified than a group ride. So this desire to win, what that means is if you really want to win these races, and this goes far above your fitness. For myself, for example, I've been pretty diligent in both the winter and early spring, really focusing on my fitness, and like I said, talking to coaches in the neighborhood. Having a high FTP is great, but if you just don't have that dog in you to win a race or to at least get a really good result, you're going to realize quickly towards the pointy end of a race that things are just going to be too aggressive and you're not going to really understand what's going on. And that's something that I've just really learned throughout these 6 weeks is when you are really trying to win a race, you can't be thinking about whether or not you have to go to work Monday morning. It's all about that moment right there. It's trying to position yourself in such a way so that you can get the results you want. And that's going to mean that you're going to be doing moves, or other people are going to be doing moves around you that might look questionable in just a regular group ride that are just totally legal moves and are acceptable moves, all in the spirit of racing. And so again, that's where understanding those pack dynamics, understanding those race dynamics, that's when all these things are going to come into play. Because if you don't understand these things, it's just going to look like everyone is riding dangerously, and sometimes mistakes happen. It's not intentional, but it's just understanding that the level of aggression and just that desire to win is tantamount over everything else. And you don't need a really good FTP or fitness to do that. You just have to understand the flows of the pack, put yourself in a position to win, and make sure that you just have the aggression associated to execute that plan. So that's it, guys. These 6 weeks of practice crits have been a fantastic tool to learn more about the world of crit racing. If you have practice crits in your area, I highly encourage you to check them out. You don't have to have the highest FTP. You don't have to have the fastest bike or the most expensive bike. You might get dropped, you may not, but you might actually shock yourself of how quickly you learn on how to maneuver through these crit races. And for myself, I don't know just exactly how many actual crits I plan to do this summer, at least a couple of them. My local club, XXX Athletico, they have been putting on a fantastic program this season for the Cat 5s, all the way up to the guys who are competing with the P12 field. And I'm just really excited to be part of this pack, and I'm really just happy to take on a new challenge. As much as I love these faster group rides, as you guys know, and I'm not trying to crap on anyone who only wants to do that, because obviously there is a safety component to that, but it is nice to take on these new challenges and to really see what these local races are like in an actual race scenario. It's totally different than the fast group ride. They both have their place in the world of cycling. They're just two completely different things, and if you really want to be competitive, you're going to have to pin up a number. There's no way around it. So I'm going to leave the video at that, guys. Questions, comments, and concerns, please feel free to leave them down below, and I'm going to check you guys on the next one. Thank you so much for watching. Peace.